Maine in the United States of America on the state of affairs from her perspective as a young African living there. I started by seeking her views on the latest happenings in her own country, Burundi, which has just come out of a presidential election.
I think what happened in Burundi recently was just a shock for many, because many Burundians believed that after 15 years, the party in power would hand the country to Gwasa, who was so loved by the people. And just like they did 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago, they stole the elections. And it's sad because when you go back to the history of the Burundi as a country, is a country where whenever there is democratic elections, it's not the voice of the people that gets to rule, besides when Sendede was voted, and that was in 2005. So the elections were just a formality because we knew that the party in power is not ready to leave. And we knew they were going to do anything possible to keep the power. So I think the struggle continues. We hope that maybe in the next elections, they will be willingly to share. And we hope that Burundi will get to have a president that cares about the country.
Right. We know very well that the Catholic Church in Burundi, is said to have a very strong opinion and a strong voice when it comes to what they say. And already they have mentioned that there are some discrepancies in this election in Burundi. Where do you see this ending? Are you seeing this as something that will just, fall on deaf ears and status quo will remain?
Yes. One, because Burundians are tired. So we have been a country that didn't get to know any form of peace for long. So Burundians are tired. So that's enough for them to accept any kind of sort of that comes to them. So they are tired. So I don't think they are ready to demand that the government be held accountable on what happened during the elections, because there was a time over a day or two when social media wasn't working. And then there are news here and there, even the Catholic Church mentioned about it, that they were unable to confirm the number of people who voted because the people from the party were missing with the elections. But because Burundians are tired, I don't think they are ready to hold the government accountable. So the status quo is going to continue. But what gives me hope is that even in the middle of all that, the people who really wanted change, the people who voted for Gwasa, and Gwasa represented change for them, he is still the status quo for them because he has been, a rebel. He has killed a lot of people. He has done so many wrong things, but he represented another future for the country. So the people who voted for him give me hope because they are not ready to be silenced. But I don't think it will change a lot because people are just tired, and their tiredness is just whatever is handed to us, we're going to take it as it is. We just want to leave.
Right. Let's now move a bit and talk about life in the United States, a country or actually a place where COVID-19 is hitting really hard as we speak today when it comes to new cases of infection. How is it like being there in the center of all this?
Oh, wow. So I've been here for quite long enough, that, and I think this pandemic has just made me realize how messed up this country is. So we are in the middle of a virus that has hit the economy of the country, that has kept all of us inside. It used to take me 5 minutes to do grocery shopping. Now it takes me 4 hours because we have to be in lines. But in the middle of all that, Americans just want to be outside. And it's funny because the idea of that we should stay in our homes to be safe doesn't resonate with most of them. So they are outside in the middle of a pandemic trying to keep up with the normal that they thought they had. And I don't know if that's what makes them Americans, to ignore the reality of the system they live in, but it confuses me as a Burundian who have lived through different type of trauma. Staying in my home is something I'm used to, but seeing them protest on being outside doesn't really inspire me in anything. It just confuses me again on how this country is messed up.
Right. It's very interesting that you say that in your own words, messed up, because we have seen a lot of Africans who have, taken risks or even dying at sea just to be able to go or get into countries like the United States of America. I want to read your thoughts on the state of affairs as they are today. We know of the police brutality videos that we've continued to see, and we know of 55 years ago where Malcolm X himself, who actually talked about police brutality, and I quote, he said that they attack the victim, and then the criminal that attacked the victim accuses this victim for attacking him. And this is what he described as the American democracy. As you sit there as an African yourself, what runs through your mind when you think of those Africans who want to rush to countries like the United States and call that in the chase of the American dream and greener pastures?
Oh, wow. I think before I came to this country, I would have loved to understand the systemic and the systems that run this country. Because when I moved here and racism, white supremacy slapped into my face, I was confused. And as you said, the reality that Malcolm X mentioned 55 years ago are still valid today. And they are valid because the United States of America is a country built on white supremacy, is a country built on anti-blackness. So is a country built on whiteness, is a country built on many wrong narratives around Black people. So our own very existence in this country doesn't matter at all. We are the criminals, we are the less raised, and our existence doesn't matter. And when you hear about it as an outsider, when you are outside of this country, you think it's a tale, you think it's not a reality. But you see it every single day in systems, at hospitals, in school. In many ways, our life as Black people in this country don't really matter at all. So when we talk about American democracy, it's a myth to me. And the American dream is also a myth to me, because the people who can really catch the American dream in this country are people who are white or white passing. A person who is Black has the less chances to make it in this country, because first of all, you're gonna arrive in the middle of institutionalized racism, and then your Blackness will not allow you to strive at the same level white people are striving. And that is the reality. You will have to work twice hard to be considered as you matter, as qualified as a white person. Then comes that when you come as an immigrant and you are Black, you are just a second citizen. And that is the reality. And the jobs that second citizens do here, we know them. Most of them don't get to make it and do the jobs that are qualified what they started. You ended up doing the very minimum wage jobs so you can be able to pay your bills. And that is the system that runs in this country. So yeah, Africans, we have the desire to go abroad and make it out there, but I want all of us to realize the conditions that we live in. You are African, you are Black, and white supremacy will catch up with you in these superpowers countries that you want to immigrate into.
Right. Would you say that we are actually, as Africans or those who are, sought immigration, status in countries like the United States of America, are the ones to blame for this because of how much they have been able to shower countries or Western nations with praises, and as far as supremacy is concerned, where do you point the finger of blame, if I may?
I turn the thing of blame again to white supremacy. And we have to understand this as a system. It's a system of power. And you know what, Eugene, when we talk about white supremacy and we mention our past, like slavery, colonialism, people tell us that it's outdated. But it's not, because what we live today is rooted in slavery and racism and colonialism. To understand the United States of America and the system that runs into the country today, you have to understand how this country was built. This country was built by white settlers who were bringing slaves from Africa. And those slaves who came here came without an identity. Then when they were liberated, this country was built on imperialism and anti-blackness. So they didn't get any other freedom because slavery ended and evolved into something else. So the blame is onto this system that runs this world, a system that will portray America as the land of the free, as the land of the living, as the paradise that everyone should dream to live in, and will hide our everyday reality here, that we are afraid to watch the birds outside, we are afraid to drive outside, we are afraid that you're just gonna meet a white police officer who is scared of black people, and you will just sneeze and he will shoot you and you'll be dead. And the only reason he will give just you are black, so you threaten him. The very simple reason that you are black. And that is what white supremacy has done to our existence. It has put us in a space where we are the villains that we don't deserve to live. So it's a system, and the blame has to be put on the system, and also the powers that sustain the system. I think look at the president we have in this country, Trump. He gets to stand up in front of people on TV and be a white supremacist and endorse racism, endorse misogyny without no consequences at all. And that gives power to the systems in power, because it emphasizes that if the president of the United States can stay quiet when the police are shooting black people, what does it say of the simple American who own a gun, and one day he will see me coming from maybe at my job and trying to enter my house, and he would think I'm trying to steal him, or I'm trying to attack him, and I'll be dead.
And nothing will be done.
The only excuses he would say is that she was a black woman.
Right.
She was an angry black woman, and that would be it.
Judy,
so the blame has to be these systems that we live in.
Right. There have been measures that have been taken by several groups of people. We understand the fact that there has been a movement called Black Lives Matter movement, which was formed in 2013, and it has sort of been very active as far as pushing against police brutality in the U.S., and they've been organizing die-ins, marches, and demonstrations in response to the killings of black men and women by the police. But do you see this as being enough? I mean, what would be enough beyond just blaming the white supremacy and these movements and demonstrations? What would be enough, in your opinion?
I mean, you just said what would be enough beyond blaming the white supremacy, and I find that problematic. I think what would be enough is that we have to abolish white supremacy, and abolishing white supremacy requires that we question the very core of power that the United States stand on, the very core of power that many of European countries stand on, and that requires that we hold them accountable. So the only way to stop police brutality in this country is to abolish white supremacy, is to abolish the context, the construct of whiteness. And what's most sad in this country is that racism, it's so institutionalized. It's in institutions. You understand? It's who gets to go to school, who gets to be in prison. It's who access this and that. And that is at the core of what whiteness has become. So for me, our organizing has to stand on a firm position that what we want isn't just the police to stop killing us. What we want is to abolish white supremacy, is to abolish all the narratives that anti-blackness stand on. And in this country, it's going to be very, very, very hard. And I'm going to be honest, I sometimes lose hope for America. And I said I've been here quite long enough to know that I lose hope, because racism is just at the core of this country. It's as if you say you have to abolish the whole country and build a new country. Because the United States, as it is now, it's funded on racism. So I don't know how this country can exist without racism. And that is another reality that people have to imagine. But as the country is now, it's funded, it thrives on racism.
Judy, there are those who actually also would argue and say that, as blacks, we, especially coming from Africa, we have sort of given legitimacy to, the democracy in these Western nations. When it comes to our elections, you'll see most opposition leaders or even those who are observing these elections, they would take what the Western observers say as a rubber stamp to actually affirm whether the elections were democratic or not. Human rights violations, we've seen fingers pointed at African countries for violating human rights, but we've seen none of the African countries pointing a finger at the United States when it comes to such kind of issues that are going on right now. What comes to your mind when you weigh this kind of happenings across the weighing scale?
You know what Thomas Sankara said when he was protesting against France-Afrique summit? He said that he who feeds you owns you. Mm-hmm. So the power dynamics between African countries and Western powers is rooted that African countries depends on Western powers. Mm-hmm. So we get loans, we get NGO aid. So it's the power dynamics. They feed us in a way or another, and we have allowed it. So they have the right to detect what's democracy, mm-hmm. even when we know they are not well. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be telling us what democracy should look like. We still listen, because at the end of the day, what feeds you owns you. Mm-hmm. So the question should be on my generation, the African generation that sees all those kind of things. Mm-hmm. How do we decolonize ourselves? How do we liberate our country? Mm-hmm. How do we abolish these power dynamics? How do we refuse that we get to be told how to be Africans, how to run our countries, how to run our elections? How do we set the terms of our own existence? And you have to remember that this is a journey. It's not going to be a one-day event. Mm-hmm. This is a journey that Nkrumah Kwame was on, that Nelson Mandela was on, that Thomas Sankara was on, and they died for it. Mm-hmm. So we have to remember that it's going to be a very, very, very challenging journey, because these powers strive on Africa. And that is a reality. And we shouldn't even fear to talk about it. They strive on Africa. They strive on controlling Africa. That's how their power streams from. So if we dare to question that, if we dare to demand that we'll be treated equally, we have to also be ready to not get the resources they're handling to us. So how should that look like? This brings us to my generation, the ones who are part of political decisions, the ones who are part of political spaces. We have to start thinking on how the relationship between Africa and the rest of the world will look like when we don't need Chinese labor, when we don't need the US funds, when we don't need UN money, when we don't need all these loans and money that we do ask to survive as a continent. How will the relationships look like? Right. Because for now, they look the way they look because we depend on them.
Right. But Judy, you and I understand that the average age of our African leaders today, if I'm not wrong, is about 60 years. And of course, a majority of leaders in Africa are mostly the ones who are sitting on these tables of negotiation for us. And so when you say that our generation today, do you see this even happening, considering the fact that very few African leaders are within your generation and my generation?
That's a very good question. Something I've learned, Adrian, is that leadership takes many other forms. And you see what we are doing right now, me and you, it's a type of leadership. And I want to dare Africans, my generation, to take up leadership. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and run your country, but you can wake up tomorrow and start a book study in your community where you talked about Pan-Africanism and what it means to care about the African continent. You can start a book study. You can start a community initiative where you take care of the land that your ancestors left you. We need to start organizing. But of course, we also need to start questioning. And it's sad because sometimes we confuse patriotism and not questioning the state. Patriotism involves that we also question the state and also question the reality of African continent. I mean, we can blame the West as we want, but some of our other issues are really rooted on our bad leadership that we have.
Yeah.
Because you cannot expect a president who can be in power for 32 years, a president who can be in power for 28 years. You cannot explain how African states have become family businesses. The father, the son, the son, the son, the son, and the son. Just a generation of family businesses that runs the country. We have to refuse to be comfortable. And I know when you are oppressed, you get to be comfortable, especially in our African, ways of living. But let's not be distracted as Africans. And also my generation, please, let's not be comfortable. Dare to take up space, dare to question. At the end of the day, we have to get to a point where we live free or die, Eugene.
Yeah.
And just like our revolutionaries did, but we have to question that. And I dare, again, I emphasize on my daring to tell my African brothers and sisters that are my generations to take up space. It's our responsibility. We owe it to ourselves. We deserve a better Africa. So let's build the better Africa.
Let's build a better Africa. Judy, before I let you go, I'll just take you back to what probably analysts argue and say takes away the moral authority from Africans to question some of the things that are happening even now in the Western nations. They would argue and say, look at yourselves. You have not been able to be united in your own way. We've seen South Africa. We had cases of xenophobia attacks where Africans stand against fellow Africans. Even when we talk about the police brutality issue, we have seen videos of police brutalizing citizens. Even here in Kenya, for example, we've seen such kind of videos and images of how people have been brutalized. So when we look at these happenings, how hard or how easy does it make it for us to question what is happening even in the Western nations like in the US right now?
The idea that to question someone else, your own life has to be perfect, is a lie. Because life is messy, that's one. But two, we were raised to never question the US because the US has always been messy, but they control the type of messiness that we have to see. And just because yesterday a video of a police killing a black man went out doesn't mean it started yesterday. It has been going on even in the era where no recordings were happening.
Yeah.
So it's just that now people are so using any resources they have to raise awareness. So yeah, we should question what's happening in the West, but we also have to look at the fire burning in our own houses. And when we talk about xenophobia, for example, this is a conversation that sometimes we escape, but xenophobia brings us back to the borders that were imposed on us and what white people made us understand about nationalism and what it means to be African. You should understand that before they found us, we were not existing according to the borders that they were imposed on us. Kingdoms had their own way of living, of course messy, but the way we view nationalism today is rooted in borders that a white man in Berlin, in a chateau, thought of imposing on us, and then we sit on that and dare to call a fellow African that doesn't fit in those borders that a white man mapped for you and say they don't belong. How fool can we get to be? And we also have to understand that this power that strive on Africa being weak and needing them, strive on us being, divided. So we also have to be wise because the very core of racism, the very core of white supremacy is to keep us distracted, to keep us away from the issues that we are facing and keep us in unnecessary fights among us. That's why I tell Africans to focus. Africans, you have to focus and realize that the very core of our existence is that way before a white person found us, they thought we didn't matter. And when they found us, they decided that our lives matter because it was rooted in them validating us. So we have to free ourselves by freeing from our own houses. So let's be honest also when we call out the West and mention the fire burning in our own houses. But police brutality, as I was talking, Eugene, in Burundi, for example, in my country, the police hunt young people all the time. You dare to question the state, they hunt on you. That's what I was talking. Let's not always blame the West. We also have our leaders invested in their own power. So we have to be honest on all type of chains that are on our necks as Africans, and dare to question them.
Right, Judy, I want to let you go, but I feel like we need this conversation to go on and on. But I have to let you go for now. I'm sure that we'll have another conversation, especially on decolonizing our mindsets and many other things. But then it's very interesting that if these things that are happening in the States were happening in a certain African country, I'm sure those organizations that advocate for human rights would have probably made some noise. But it's very interesting. There are people who are arguing and saying, why is it that an organization like Human Rights Watch, for instance, right now has not made any statements concerning such kind of things? I don't know what your quick take would be on this as we wrap it up.
I mean, an organization like Human Rights Watch is rooted in showcasing Africa as the villain, part of the world. So they won't care what's happening in the West because their agenda is to focus on how Africa is the last place any human being should be on, and to showcase on how horrible it is to be in Africa. And it's funny because you will see why people traveling to Africa and trying to tell you how they're scared, that they're not going to survive a day. And you're like, my sister, you live in the States. Why aren't you scared of how unstable your country is? So again and again, it's just because these powers are rooted in an African narrative that doesn't sustain the autonomy and the well-being of Africans. It's an African narrative that shows that Africa always will need to be saved. And the question is, who do we need to be saved from?
Quite a thought-provoking conversation right there with Judicaelle Irakoze. She is Burundian, but living in the United States of America, just trying to give us her own perspective of the whole white supremacy issue and many other continental issues. And I will be looking forward to reading your thoughts and comments from the conversations that we've had on this show tonight. All you need to do is just keep the conversations going at the hashtag Africa411 on our social media platforms, at TV47KE or at Eugene Anangwe. That's my personal social media handle, and I'll be happy to get in touch with you. If you'd like to be part of this program, also get in touch with us. We'll be able to share with you on how to be on the show. I want to wrap it up from that particular note, but I want to thank all our panelists, Pastor Martin Semper from Uganda, Judicaelle in the United States, and of course Prof, who actually gave us perspective on the numbers of COVID-19. But I also want to thank our producers and presenters or reporters who put together the stories that we've had for you right here. Our sound engineers and the entire technical crew, and most importantly, our sign language interpreter, Anne Wairimo. I cannot thank you enough because of the fact that you translate this and interpret this to ensure that it reaches many other people who might not be able to get this if you are not seated right there and doing what you're doing right now. Thank you very much for being a part of Africa 411. We'll talk Africa again next week, same time, same place. My name as always is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye.